What happens when you take the fourth installment of the Hammer Dracula series, Dracula Rise from the Grave, and ask a person who has never seen any of these movies to step into the middle of this franchise to a movie that is actually the sequel to a previous film released 2 years prior, and then give my thoughts on it? Well, you get this episode of Podio Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo, and today we are going to be talking about Dracula Rise from the Grave, a 1968 Hammer supernatural horror film. And it's my first time really experiencing Christopher Lee as Dracula. And this movie is interesting to watch. Definitely different sensibilities, and we'll be talking about that here on the episode. One of the things I need to start off with is this is a sponsored episode, which is something you can do if you happen to enjoy my thoughts on films. If there's a movie out there you want me to watch, you can always sponsor it. This episode is sponsored by HBarts, who is one of the more prolific sponsors of not only Podio Commentary, but Hollywood After Dark, my other podcast. And I really want to thank him for sponsoring this episode and then giving me the opportunity to dive in to something that I know he's a huge fan of. But I have thoughts about this movie. Oh my gosh, I have thoughts about this movie. I just want to start off by saying, when it's good, it's good. Like, when it gets going, it's really solid. But until then, there's times where you really question the motivations. Now, granted, I have not seen the previous movie, which was called Dracula, Prince of Darkness, which came out in 1966. And even though this is a direct sequel to that, there are really no references to the previous film outside of how Dracula comes back to life. And we're going to be talking about that. So this movie is directed by Freddie Francis, who had done The Curse of Frankenstein a couple years prior for Hammer Films. And I'm assuming that one did really well because they wanted him to come on to do this. It was written by Anthony Hinds. And it stars Christopher Lee, who is probably the most prolific actor to ever play the role of Dracula. And I think he did 8 or 9 of these Hammer films throughout the course of his career. And it's always kind of fun to look at because this movie is probably less about Dracula and more about just Dracula getting revenge. And that's where it kind of ties in to the last movie, the Prince of Darkness film. So in the last movie, they killed Dracula by throwing his coffin into an ice-covered moat. He ends up drowning, I guess, right, or freezing. And that's where he's been subdued for the past 12 months. The movie randomly opens with a church in the city, and the young altar boy, who I can only describe as being not like deaf and dumb, but being dumb. He's definitely a simpleton. He's a simple lad. Goes into the church and he's praying at the altar, and then all of a sudden he starts seeing, he goes to ring the bell, right? Ring the church bell. And there's blood coming through, and he's like, oh, and he runs upstairs. And inside the church bell is a maiden. Don't know who she is, don't know her backstory, don't know how she got there, but she's got vampire fang bites in her neck, and there's blood all over the floor. And that, of course, is what causes him to freak out. Then the priest, who's simply just known in the movie as being priest, ends up walking up there, seeing it, freaking out. Movie apparently starts. It cuts to 12 months later. They don't really tell you that it's 12 months later, but it's 12 months later, and you've got a Monsignor. Okay, the Monsignor Ernst Mueller is now bombing his way into town. He's just on his horse. He's just a horse and buggy doing his thing. Decides to visit the village while he's traveling around the countryside and wants to know what's going on, wants to know what's happening. Why isn't anyone in church? Why hasn't the priest given mass? Why is the priest sitting in a bar in the middle of the day doing shots? What's happening here? Then they go, the evil from the castle is still there. The evil from Dracula is still there. So Mueller's like, all right, well, we're going to go up. We're just going to seal this mofo off, man. He basically has to yell at the priest to get the priest to nut up, to go with him, to show him the way to the castle. What I love about it is they grab the cross Like Mueller grabs the cross from the altar, slings it over his shoulder like it's a freaking weapon, and they haul ass up a mountain to get up to this castle. And while they're getting up there, the priest is just, he's just famished, he's just fatigued, he's scared. He's worried about going to the castle because he fears the darkness contained within. And then Mueller's like, all right, stay here. I'll come back. We'll go down together, whatever. Mueller heads on up, goes up to the outside of the castle, which hasn't been opened. It's still sealed, I'm assuming from the last movie. Puts the cross in and then reads the rite of exorcism. And as he's doing this, it starts to, bring about a thunderstorm, and there's lightning and chaos and everything that's happening around. Lots of wind. And the priest gets scared and he tries to run down the mountain, but he ends up tripping and falling and landing, I guess you could say, on top of this frozen riverbed, this frozen moat, whatever. It's very poorly explained as to what it is. And then he falls and breaks open the ice where Dracula's corpse is, but he hit his head, so his blood then runs down and then just magically just ends up in Dracula's mouth. I mean, look, 1968, okay? Some conventions of storytelling, they've improved in the past, 55 years, but still, it's a little bit hard to believe in some respects that his blood would just randomly end up there. But I get it. On paper, it makes sense. You're writing the script and you're like, yeah, no, I totally get this. He falls. Okay. He hits his head. Okay. Blood runs from his head. Okay. Open head wound. Yeah. Into the mouth of Dracula. Oh, I like that. That works. But then the way they shot it, just whatever. I also kind of think that no one really cared, to be fair. Because at this point, then Dracula wakes up. The first instance we have of Christopher Lee as Dracula is this, the iconic pose of where he's like erect and stoic and pointing the finger, and he's close up of the eyes, and that's meant to hypnotize the priest, who now becomes his familiar, like Renfield. And then from there, the two decide to go back to the castle, but Ernst is already, he's put the cross there. He's exorcised the castle. The castle cannot be entered by Dracula. He needs someone to pull the cross out, but the priest can't do it, apparently. That comes up to play later on a little bit in the movie as well. They don't really tell you what it is, what's stopping the priest from doing it necessarily, because it's there's a scene later on in the movie where the young girl, Maria, right, has a cross on her, and he's like, I can't touch it, and that's, so, I'm obviously that's kind of meant to be under the control of Dracula. He's not able to pull anything with crosses on it, but they kind of undo that towards the end of the movie, which I'll talk about. So it's a little bit weird. The rules of engagement with what makes Dracula a vampire don't really apply. But either way, Dracula gets pissed. And this is what I love about this movie. What I really enjoyed about this movie was that the story is largely Dracula goes on a revenge spree, right? He wants to get into his castle. He can't get into his castle because it's been exorcised by a Monsignor. So what do? They go to the town where the Monsignor is, and they want to basically get revenge on him, probably to get him to compel him to remove the exorcism, or to remove the cross, or to kill him and his family. There's really no set path for revenge on this one. It's not like I'm going to find you and I'm going to kill you sort of thing. It's very much just we're going to go there and see what happens. We're just going to wing it. Boys trip, essentially. Right, they go back to the main city, and that's kind of what happens. So then we cut back to the main city. Obviously, Mueller's returned home. We find out that his brother has died, but Mueller has been living with his sister-in-law and his niece and whatever. And what I love about this scene is they clearly have feelings for each other. They clearly have feelings. Like the sister-in-law loves Mueller and he loves her, and he makes a comment you're basically my wife in every way but the real way of going about it. And she's like, oh, don't say such a thing, as she's taking off his dirty boots and putting on his slippers and telling him to go lay down. All the guy had to do was just be like, hey, you want to come lay down with me? And she would have been like, oh, Ernst, and then she would have gotten his sausage. But I'm just saying, it's like there was that little like relationship aspect of it, which I thought was interesting. It was interesting character development. It went nowhere, but it was an interesting way of setting up, like, he's got the, he's the priest, he's the Monsignor, he oversees 6 churches in the city. Like, he can't be with a woman. It would be improper. But there would be that, like, that, we love each other, but we can't be together sort of thing. That back and forth that never really kind of went anywhere. And it would have been an interesting thing to do, considering the fact that one of the biggest problems this movie has, and I mean this in like the most critical way possible. This is a 90-minute movie with probably about 65 minutes of actual story. That's the thing. It's got about maybe an hour of actual story and about 25 minutes of just nothing, especially in like the back 2 acts of the film. There are so many moments in this movie where I'm watching it and I'm just like, I don't know. I'm kind of bored because nothing happens. And I don't know if it's meant to just set the scene or if it's meant to just be, dramatic and be, tense and everything else. But it really just kind of goes, okay, you could move the story along here. You don't need to have like minutes of no dialogue, as it seems. But they did. And obviously, again, this was a way to stretch out the time, to stretch it all out. They wanted a simple vampire movie with a small character amount. And from there, that's what they wanted to work on. That's what they went with. And again, they had only a few different sets and they reused them many times. And it worked well for what they were trying to do. But again, they had a lot there that they could have played upon. There was a lot there they could have built up, especially leading to the dramatic death of Mueller. I guess it's a death. Again, I'll talk more about that. So it's just that whole notion of, there was more they could have put into this, is what I'm trying to say. Because when they get to town, you find out that Maria's got a boyfriend. Maria's got a boyfriend. His name is Paul. Paul works in the bakery. He's studying to be a scholar. He could be a doctor. He could be whatever he wants. He's in school, smart, strapping lad who is in love with Maria and simply just wants to be with her. But the thing is, they go to the family. Right? He goes there and he smells like booze because it's a college town. And so at the bar where the bakery is next to, all the college kids kind of play a bit of a prank on him and he ends up getting beer splashed all over him. And then that's used as like a way for the Monsignor to look down upon him because he wants it to be a perfect meeting. But then, of course, the Monsignor asks the question that all Monsignors would ask. So, my lad, where do you go to church? Is a question. And then Paul stoically, right, very Britishly states, I'm an atheist. And then, there's like this harumph type moment between them that I thought was interesting. And Paul's polite. He's like, maybe I should leave. And the Anna, right, Maria's mom, the sister-in-law, is like, I think it'd be for the best. And then Maria's like, but I love him, mama. But he's an atheist. We can't have that. What would the townsfolk think? It's a lot of that kind of mentality, which is interesting. That's character development. I thought that was fun. But he goes back to the bar, and there, of course, you've got the barmaid, Xena, played by Barbara Ewing. Now, she, I think, had probably the most compelling story arc and the most compelling character motivations out of anyone in the movie, and she got totally screwed over. So she is the barmaid. She's out there. She's got her boobs hanging out. All the college guys are basically just ogling them all the time, flirting with her. She's, I don't want to say she's a bit of a trollop or she's a bit easy, right? But she's been around the block. She kind of makes a bit of a pass at Paul, and Paul makes a comment about her boyfriends and how many she's had, and then she kind of goes, oh, but what about you, sort of thing. And she clearly has feelings for him, and she knows that he has feelings for Maria. And so when he gets drunk because he's pissed off at what happened with the Monsignor, the two of them have this moment. And you kind of think, like, she's going to make a move, maybe. Maria's going to come back, and we're going to find out that Xena's been, like, sexually assaulting Paul because he's too drunk to consent. And she gets him upstairs, and they kiss for a brief second. But then, she doesn't do anything because it's like Maria. She knows he loves Maria, and she's not going to kind of cross that boundary. But she does go to unzip his pants right as Maria like sneaks in his room. And then Maria doesn't ask any questions like, what are you doing? Or she's like blissfully ignorant. And then Xena kind of also then goes, okay, fine, and she's like, he's your boyfriend. You clean him up. And then she exits the room, but you just see her like, she's forlorn, right? She wants a love like that. And she also, I don't think to some extent feels that she's worthy of a love like that, which is a really compelling performance on her part, which is one of the things I enjoyed about it. Because from there, she leaves and she's, going to go walk home. And she even makes a comment like the barkeep is like, you could just stay here, and I'm like, are you trying to get some, dude? Like you're making your play. And she's like, nah, I'll just walk home. It's good for my figure. Just, again, interesting thing to say, but like, all right, she understands. She understands the game. Xena's like the one character in this movie that like understands the game. So she's walking home, and then we get the priest in Dracula's carriage, and he chases her down. She falls to the ground, and then Dracula appears, and he bites her neck. Doesn't kill her, but he bites her neck. He feeds on her, turns her into one of his slaves. But from there she becomes one of his slaves, and she knows that her job is to feed him. But when he takes an interest in Maria, because he finds out that Maria is the Monsignor's niece, Xena gets pissed. She's like, what do you need her for? You've got me. And she's upset. Rightfully so, she's upset. She's upset that he is obviously like not wanting to be with her, but she also is like so wanting that connection and that love, that here's this guy who literally, this monster that bit her, drank her blood, is using her for that, and is also a way to bring Maria to him, that she's just angry about it. And so when she tries to get Maria and that whole thing fails, she gets mad, she gets frustrated, she calls out Dracula, and he just straight kills her. He just kills her, drinks her blood, and then tells the priest, get rid of the body. And then we see the priest, he picks her up and he walks into the bakery, and there's like the fire, and again, they only have so few sets for this movie, so they're reusing a lot of them for just different scenes. But there's this fire pit, and it's implied that he puts her body in the fire pit, and he is very regretful. Like you could tell he doesn't want to do it. He doesn't have like a lot of dialogue in the movie necessarily, but his facial reactions and body language kind of play that up. Like he is stuck, he is trapped, and he is scared. And this is what he did. And then that's it. Like that's the end of Xena. Right. And then but after that, it'd be like, oh, where'd she go, man? Like, what's going on? And then the movie has to keep moving on. But that part was kind of sad, because here's the kicker. She's the only kill in the whole movie. She is the only kill that Dracula has that we see in the whole 90-minute runtime. So in Dracula Rises from His Grave, she's the only person he kills. Now, he tries to go after Maria. He bites her. He kind of entrances her a little bit. Paul, wants to go save her. This, of course, with the help of the Monsignor, who knows that Dracula is back. And he tries to fight back, but he ends up getting knocked in the head by the priest. Dracula then makes his way, with Maria. Mueller is on the couch. He's asking for help from Paul. Paul then runs to go get herbs and spices and whatever else he needs from KFC to bring them back over to the house, and grabs the priest as a bit of backup. And then when Mueller sees the priest, Mueller at this point has a heart attack and dies. But again, they don't say that he has a heart attack and dies. He just goes, "Arr!" and then falls over. And then, the sister-in-law is like, Ernst, no, nein. And, you think he's dead. It kind of implies it, but he could also just be passed out. It is what it is. So then Paul's trying to, get to Maria, and he fights Dracula a little bit. They end up running back to the village because Dracula does get control of Maria, takes Maria to the castle. Now he's taking Maria to the castle. At the same time, Paul is going back to the village, trying to get anyone in the tavern, the village people, to help him go up to the castle to fight him. Because remember, he doesn't believe in God. He's now seeing evil for the first time, but all the townsfolk are just afraid. They try to lock him away in order to make sure that he can't like bring any more trouble to town and get him to cool down. But then you've got the altar boy from earlier who just comes in and like grunts and he's like, I'll take you up there. So then like they escape and they run up there, but we never see the altar boy again because Paul gets up to the castle and Maria has taken the cross off of the door. The cross falls, basically lands right in the dirt. He wrestles Dracula. Dracula falls, lands on the cross, impale him, spike in the chest, everything else. And then he just like, he doesn't really like blow up. He doesn't really do anything. He just kind of hisses for a while. And then also like the priest finally gets his power back. Like the priest finally got his groove back and then starts doing the exorcism as Dracula is impaled. And then that basically just like eviscerates, evaporates, liquefies Dracula's body. We don't see Dracula, what happens to him. All we see is his cape and a whole bunch of blood on the ground. Now, that has a lot to do with the fact that this movie is rated G for general audiences, but still, and that's it. And then Paul and Maria embrace. And then, you know, Paul, this is funny. Paul, I'm an atheist, looks down at Dracula, at the corpse or at the cape, at the cross, whatever. And he does like the, you know, spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. He crosses himself, which is an interesting thing. I'm watching this movie and that's where it ends. And I'm watching this movie and it gets to this point and that's where it ends. And I'm like, what in this is some crazy ass Catholic propaganda, man. This is some serious crazy ass Catholic propaganda. What in the hell is going on here? But that is what they did. And I kind of get it from a character perspective, right? He's an atheist. He doesn't believe. And that was a point of contention. And we're living in a time when everyone goes to church. So being an atheist is almost like having a scarlet letter, right? And then at the end, he witnesses pure evil. He defeats pure evil through what could only be described as the power of Christ, right? Having it be a cross, having there be an exorcism service being read by the other priest. Obviously, at this point, his lack of faith has now been shook to almost include faith. So you can kind of understand that from that character perspective. It just, to me, it comes across as just whatever. I was like, okay. But by the end of the movie, I was just ready for it to be over. And I really hate that when a movie is like, it gets going, slows down, peaks, valleys. This always happens in movies like this. Yes. But when I'm watching this thing, I'm thinking to myself, like, just hurry up and get to the damn ending. That is what we need you to do. We just need you to hurry up and get to the damn ending of this film. Because it's just like all the times it slows down, it feels like it grinds to a halt. And in modern storytelling, in modern movie making, that wouldn't happen. There would be something on every page. That's what happens now. There's rarely any slowdown time, or it's just catch your breath moments before ramping it back up again for the full 90-minute runtime. Here, they didn't really have any catch your breath moments because nothing ever ramped up enough in the first two acts of the film to really kind of get you to that point. What we're talking about here is largely character development or a lack thereof. And like I said, Xena is pretty much the only character that has an arc in this movie, right? We get motivations from her. Everyone else is just kind of there. And that's where I feel like Barbara Ewing gave like the best performance. Paul did a good job. I mean, Christopher Lee as Dracula is always fun because he just chews up the scenery that he's in, but he has so few lines of dialogue in the movie. There's another movie he was in, I forget the name of it, that he was in, where Dracula doesn't speak at all. And the story, you know, as it's said from Christopher Lee's perspective, is that the dialogue was so terrible for Dracula that he told the producers and the director that he isn't going to say it, that he's just not going to do it. Whereas the screenwriter for that movie basically came out and went like, that's BS because Dracula just doesn't talk anyway. So, I mean, like, you know, he said in this particular situation, we don't quite know, but still mostly here, Christopher Lee was just kind of like chewing the scenery. He's great to see in the role, but like, you do wish that there was more for him to do. But then again, if the character of Dracula is meant to be this puppet master, this menacing figure that runs in the background. That was something that they conveyed pretty well. And I really enjoyed the priest, played by Ewan Hooper. I really enjoyed like his attempt at, like, he did what he was told to do, but he was trying to fight it. And he was always kind of in turmoil. And even though he didn't have a lot of dialogue, he was still very much like conveying that through his, facial expression and body language. And so this was a bit more maybe on that front. Maybe I'm being a little bit unfair when I talk about like the peaks and valleys and how it just kind of grinds to a halt. But they really were trying to at times really play up the I don't want to say the method acting, but the character acting, which I thought was entertaining. And I really wanted more of that. Like, I would have liked to have seen more of Paul and Ernst teaming up together, right? And then having that duality of conversation where the Monsignor is like, by the grace of God, we shall win. And then Paul's like, yeah, okay, can we not do that, please? Thank you. Right? Can we not please talk about God? But then if he's going to have that crisis of faith, or if he's going to have that come to a faith, then in that particular motion, or, that storyline would have played out by them having those kind of dialogues, having those kind of conversations, to where like him going from being a non-believer to a believer has to have a pathway through. And I think that would have been a way more compelling way of telling that particular story, especially if Dracula, who is now risen from the grave, has such little to do in the overall hour and a half you're watching this movie. It isn't by no means a bad film. It is by no means the worst film I've ever seen, nor is it the best film I've ever seen. It's a movie that it failed to hit the mark it needed to hit. But then again, I'm looking at this through contemporary 2023 lens, and never mind the fact that I've been watching films for the 40 years I've been alive, but even this movie was like 20 some odd years before I was born. Like 22 years, I think, before I was born or something. No, less. I was born in 82. This came out in 68. So it was 14 years before I was born. And the conventions of storytelling, especially with horror and with the MPAA system and everything else, you can tell that this movie was made for a very specific audience. And that specific audience of people were apparently terrified. Apparently there were faintings. Apparently people were screaming in the theater. This is because they were just never truly, I've grown up with like the 80s horror films, the 90s horror films, 70s horror films, stuff that is made of this pure nightmare fuel. That's the shit that I was born and raised on as a kid. But back then they didn't have that because this is a rated G movie. What could you show? So instead of showing boobs, they had very low cut tops. They had a lot of suggestive content. Paul and Maria in one scene allude to have sex out of wedlock, sinning. Ooh, make it a little tantalizing, a little titillating, things along those lines. That's what I'm talking about. And again, it's just the movies from a different time, a different era. Obviously, I do need to dive into more of these Hammer films. They are fun. I just wish there was more to the story. But of course, those are my thoughts. What are yours? I want to hear if you've seen this movie. What do you think about it? If I'm wrong, let me know. If I'm right, let me know. If there's a movie you want me to watch, you guys can always sponsor an episode. Or you know what? We're going to do probably more of the live shows, at least maybe once every couple weeks. And that will be something that will be a community chosen event. So be sure to check that out. If you guys are listening to this on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe. If you're listening to this on podcast, please also leave a review wherever you can. Follow me on Twitter at Podio Commentary. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great day. Thank you again, and peace out.